It's 2025 and people are exploring the idea of having polyamorous or ethical non-monogamy, as it's called, types of relationships. And I'm here to tell you why polyamory is a horrible deal for men. I'm Paul, behavioral and mental performance expert, and today we're going to talk about different relationship structures and what can work if you want to have a successful long-term legacy relationship, and also what is not going to work ever. Now, years ago, I ran my own little case study and I talked to dozens and dozens of couples. I was able to talk to elderly couples who had been together for 20 plus years. And I had been looking for those couples who were in very happy peak relationships, and they were hard to find. But I found a number of them. And what I noticed about all of them is that none of them were polyamorous. I think we should make that point. I've never seen a polyamorous relationship or a swinger relationship that works out for men. They think it does. People lie about it and say it does. Men ego protect and talk about how it's some sort of a great deal, but it generally is not. It's a horrible deal. And if you need any data, 92%, according to what data we do have out there, 92% of polyamorous relationships fail. Now, when I say polyamorous, I'm talking about where women can go out and have sex with other people. All right. If the woman is able to have sex with other people, it's not going to work out the way that you want as the man in the equation long term. So this has become more and more of an issue because it's gynocentric. Pushing ethical non-monogamy, pushing polyamory has actually come from more of a gynocentric point of view. So when I say gynocentric, it's a female-centered viewpoint. Now, a lot of guys might be sitting there going, well, what do you mean it's female-centered? Don't I get to have sex with other women too? Isn't it equal? No. See, if it was a male-centered dynamic, you would just have her not sleep with other people and you would occasionally sleep with other women. So if you were thinking from a male-centered point of view, you would have the woman that you're investing your resources in for a long-term relationship not sleep with other men, and you would sleep with other women occasionally. That is the male-centered point of view. The woman-centered point of view is more focused on equality, where both people can do the same thing. The problem, though, is equality doesn't exist because men and women are not the same. So you can't have equality when two people are swinging or sleeping with other people. It just doesn't exist. What actually, and the reason why is because women are hypergamous by nature and men are not hypergamous. Okay. So as a man, you could go out and sleep with other women and still love and honor your wife as your number one girl. It's physically possible. And I'm not saying or suggesting you should do this, especially for my religious people out there who want to do, and my more conservative types who want to do monogamous relationships. I'm not saying you should go sleep with other people as a man. That's a very popular thing to say now in like red pill and men's space, that somehow you're not alpha if you're not sleeping with other women, and all that stuff is a bunch of bullcrap. Okay. If you want to be monogamous, you certainly can, and we'll get into that. However, you are capable, though, in terms of brain wiring and in terms of evolution, you are capable of being able to sleep with other women who are not who you see as your legacy best person to be with. All right. So you can see the girl at home. And this is a challenge for men who end up cheating sometimes, because sometimes they're actually more attracted to their wife. They love their wife. The wife is the top girl in their eyes, and they end up cheating with somebody who's just another woman. Men, evolutionarily speaking, seek variety. That was the male mating strategy. So men are capable in their minds of having sex with women who are not the best that they could do sexually, and that works out okay. Women are not wired that way. Women are more sexually selective than men. There is more of an inherent danger for a woman to sleep with a guy than a man because she could potentially get pregnant by the wrong guy. Because of that danger, this caused hypergamy, or in other words, her looking or seeking out the genetic best to have sex with. So female attraction is partly based on finding that guy who she perceives based on looks and behaviors and emotions that she has. She wants to find the guy who she perceives as that sexual best. If you're in a relationship like a marriage with her and you're trying to invest your resources in your life into her, and she goes out and sleeps with other men to get sexual needs met, the message to her mid and lower brain is that you are not the best she can do sexually. She's getting her sexual desires met by other men, and you're just at home as the resource provider. She no longer sees you as her sexual best. Now, for most guys, this brings anxiety and fear. The polyamory, gynocentric world, okay, wants to try to give you instructions on how to deal with your jealousy. Well, your jealousy is there for a reason, because if she sees somebody else as more sexually desirable, because she's hypergamous, she's no longer going to see you with the same love and respect as a leader of the house and a husband. If you are, let me illustrate it to you a better way. If you are having sex with your woman and you're the best she could do sexually, like you do it for her, right? She has all the orgasms with you and hasn't experienced a better man. And then there's some conflict in the relationship and you have to tell her no, or you have to tell her to sit this one out and you're doing it your way and not hers. She is much more able to accept that. And in fact, if you apply that dominance to her and tell her no, or tell her to sit this one out, we're doing it my way, that actually makes her more attracted to you when you are her sexual best. She actually wants to sleep with you more, even if she's annoyed with you or upset with you or angry with you for being told no. She's actually feels your dominance, feels your power as that man who's her sexual best, and she becomes more attracted. If she's getting her sexual needs met outside of the relationship, more so than inside the relationship, which is what it always turns into almost every time, really just about every time when it's open polyamory, and you tell her no, you're her sexual mid. Okay. You're not the best she's ever done, and you're not the best who's nailing her right now. She's not going to take that no, and she's not going to be happy with you telling her no. She's not going to become more sexually attracted to you when you say, sit this one out, we're doing it my way. In fact, she's going to either not listen to you, do everything that she feels like doing, or she's going to get very angry with you, because how dare you, as a lower value man with a lower value seed, tell her what to do? She's sleeping with Chad or Tyrone on the weekends. So how dare you, her husband, tell her anything? And that is the attitude and the feeling that she will have. So there is no equality here, because your ability as a man to sleep with other women is not the same as hers, and vice versa. It has different effects on a male brain versus a woman's brain. So there isn't any equality here. Even though you may say we can, in fairness, sleep with other people in the same way and have the same equal boundary, the effects on the brain are not equal. So it changes the dynamic of the relationship and it's definitely not equal. In fact, it turns it into a power dynamic where either she has to run the show and you have to be the subservient male, or she's going to be angry with you and you're going to fight a lot until the relationship eventually is over with. That's how polyamorous relationships go. Relationships in general aren't that high percentage of being successful, but 92% of polyamorous relationships, they break up. They're done with, right? I mean, it's the failure rate is so high. And that's looking at actual marriages, not just casual relationships. So it's not a good prognosis. And the reason why is because ultimately she's not going to respect the resource provider at home. And eventually she's going to degrade that guy and get sick of him and eventually want to leave the relationship. Or the guy is going to get fed up with being in this position where he's basically a prisoner to some girl's needs and wants because she doesn't respect him. It just ends up being a bad deal. Okay. A lot of things I'm going to say here are not going to be very popular to women because women want this equality and the women want this thing where everything's the same. And women in society today are afraid of a man leading and are afraid of a power dynamic where a man is the dominant force of that power dynamic in that relationship. That being said, if women can get over that and find the right guy, they're going to be much happier and do much better. Polyamory feeds into the female centered mating strategy. Okay, so it feeds into her dual mating strategy. In absence of having the best guy that's the best that she can do, she's going to want to have a legacy partner that can take care of her resources, be a good dad, be a supportive husband, who she might not be as sexually attracted to as other men. And then she wants the ability to go out and have sex with other men who are more attractive, okay, in her eyes. So that is the dual mating strategy. And this is very appealing to a lot of women. Okay, so a lot of women and the female centered ideology, it's appealing for the woman to have polyamory because polyamory allows the woman to exercise her dual mating strategy. The problem is the beta provider man at home is pretty much unable to execute that strategy in the same way. He's not able to get women to the degree that his wife can get. He desires, even if he can get those women, he desires to have a legacy partner that he leads and is the dominant force in that relationship. Most men want that, minus a few outliers. And that is effectively ruined because the woman ends up not being able to respect that man who's no longer seen as her source of sexual pleasure or her sexual best. Okay. And variety sex is generally not a thing for women, not in the same way as men. They want variety, sure, but they want the best. And so she's sending those messages to her brain that the guy she has in a relationship or the guy at home is not really the best. And therefore, she needs to get somebody else's seed. And it's just a bad psychological dynamic that is destined to fail and sets you up as a man for failure. Now, a lot of guys get sold on the idea, though, because they think, well, I get to have sex with other women and it's cool and I can just control my jealousy and everything will be fine. But it's not fine because even if you can control your jealousy, she's not going to be able to control her hypergamy. She's not going to be able to control her brain wiring to want to respect and honor the more dominant sexual force in her life. So it ultimately puts you in an enslaved situation because now you're in a relationship with a commitment, with resources tied up. If you're married, you're living under the same roof, maybe even sharing, you have children together. You're all entangled. The responsibility as a man is for you to provide, usually to some degree. And you're stuck with a person who no longer respects you, no longer is going to she's not going to be turned on by you when you tell her no. Okay. She's not going to be excited to follow your lead. And she's seeking out sexual opportunity to get off outside of your relationship. She would rather have that experience. This is the definition of enslavement in a marriage. It's not a good deal. So let's look at what might be better deals, okay? Well, I do want to cover this. Let's look at when can polyamory, so let's look at when can polyamory be okay? Well, the answer for a man is when you don't care about a future with her. And that's really the answer for a woman too. Okay. If you don't care about a future with this person you're with, then who cares who she sleeps with? So if you're in a casual relationship, well, you don't care if she sleeps with people when she's not with you as much, right? If you're kind of sleeping around, if you're spinning plates, and oftentimes, and I even recommend, depending on the circumstance, guys are not just with one woman, they're dating different women until they decide what woman they want to be with, right? When you decide on a legacy partner, that's different. But until you get there, you want to date, right? You want to see different women. And you might be having sex with different women. And you're not necessarily asking questions about what she's up to, right? If there's no future in it or no future you can foresee, then her sleeping with other people is not a big deal because you don't care if you're not building a life and investing your whole entire life and resources into this person. But if you get to a point where you want to invest your life into a person, that's the point where polyamory cannot happen. It cannot work. She can't be making choices to sleep with other men and see you as the man she respects and honors and wants to live her entire life with. So for long-term relationships, polyamory, where she's in any form of a relationship where she sleeps with other men, does not work. Okay. Now let's trace back into our history. We grew up into polyamorous tribes, all right, to different degrees for a couple 100,000 years. But you have to understand, we were not meant to be together as men and women in peace and in harmony, for a long-term relationship until we grow old together. That's not how we were designed because that did not promote many and diverse offspring. Having a turmoil of relationships promoted diverse offspring and made it more likely for your offspring to survive, for you to have a few children, move into the next generation. So the average life cycle of primitive woman would be to start having sex as soon as her body is ready. Okay, she might pair off with a guy, and that's her first guy. Her brain is not stable enough and fully developed when this happens. So she is emotionally erratic when she goes through this, but she pairs off with a guy or even a couple of guys, if it's completely polyamorous, has a child with a particular guy. The child is taken care of by either the tribe's resources or the man in the tribe, depending on which tribe, okay, in the structure. After a couple of years, and when the kid is a little bit older, she starts to lose interest in the guy she's with, which is why our neurochemical system in our brain, we fight losing interest in our partners over time, setting her. So she's set up now to mate switch or cuck the guy that she's with. And so she might, go with a different guy, or the guy that she's with dies and she hooks up with somebody else because people died all the time back then, right? Or perhaps she sleeps with another guy that she's more attracted to and then has the guy that she bore her first child with take care of that kid with his resources. That the definition of being cuckolded. He doesn't know that child is his, right? So it's just complete turmoil for this woman who's mate switching and cheating and doing a dual mating strategy. And so she ends up, by the time she's, let's say, around 30 years old, having had kids with a few different fathers, and then she dies of something. So people had the capacity to live to older ages, but they generally didn't, because without medical care, they died due to violence, due to getting sick, due to poor nutrition, whatever. And so that describes about 200,000 years of our existence. That does not describe the type of relationship where you meet your significant other when you're young and you get in a happy monogamous relationship, and then you last for 30, 40 plus years into your old age. And then you and your wife, you guys are together until you're 85 years old. Then eventually you die of something when you're 85. That's the expectation we have today for long-term relationships, that we get into this relationship and it lasts decades of happiness and then we pass away. But that is not how our brains are wired. So there is a wiring for polyamory. However, if a woman is doing polyamory, she's not happy in the relationship with her dominant partner. She's all over the place, emotionally erratic, spitting out different kids with different dads, and then dead eventually. Okay, that was a strategy that because infanticide, children dying of disease, things of that sort, you might have back then 4 or 5 kids and 2 or 3 of them died, didn't make it to 5 years old. So it was an advantage to mate switch back then. It was an advantage, evolutionarily speaking, to not be a good match for somebody for a long term. So what we're doing now is we're fighting against some of these natural tendencies. Now, the good news is you can have great long-term relationships that last decades into your old age. You can have that dream because you have a functioning neocortex as a human being. So you can make decisions as to what primal drives you want to feed and which primal drives you need to redirect and handle in certain ways. You can condition your behavior. You can condition your beliefs to make something work out long term. But if she is sleeping with other men, you cannot have that happy, healthy, long-term legacy relationship. Those two things don't fit together. So your choices are polyamory, where your best case scenario is that you're like buddies with her while she sleeps with other dudes. Occasionally you get to sleep with her too, but you're just sharing resources and buddies at that point. That's the best case scenario. Worst case is she doesn't respect you, gets annoyed, gets unhappy with you, and systematically dismantles the relationship you're in. That's what you're in for polyamory. So next we're going to talk about, well, what can work? So polyamory doesn't work. What could we make work?
Once there was a caveman named Grok who had eyes for the lovely Neela. Neela was the most beautiful cave woman in the tribe, with her sparkling eyes, infectious laughter, and fat booty. But Grok wasn't the only one smitten by her. All the Chads and Tyrones of the land wanted her too. He tried different ways to attract her, showing off his prowess with a spear, doing favors, bringing gifts, and even serenading her under the moonlit sky. But Neela never seemed to return his affections. She was always kind to Grok, but Grok was only 5'10", and Neela only had eyes for the 6-foot-tall Chads, or so he thought. Determined more than ever, Grok decided to do a pickup artist boot camp in a faraway land. He built up his confidence and learned how to talk to hundreds of cave Stacys, even winning the affection of a few. But when Grok came home to use his newfound skills on Neela, he could sense that same disinterest in her eyes. He could get average Stacys to want to bear his children, but could not win over Neela, or any cave woman as beautiful as she. The pickup artistes told Grok it's a numbers game, and that he had to sleep with thousands of drunk Stacys to get a beauty like Neela. Confused, Grok went to the secret societies of different color pills for advice. But all they could offer were different chants of, just next her, bro, and she only bangs Chads, over and over again. If only I could learn real seduction skills to make Neela fall in love with me, Grok thought. Neela went on to live happily ever after, having babies with a man named Og. Og had secretly learned sexpionage skills. Og was 5'5". The problem with pickup courses today is that they rely on the numbers game. You talk to hundreds of girls, and finally, a chick wants to sleep with you. And usually, these aren't the women of your dreams. Sexpionage is my new course that will train you how to actually seduce the women that you want, not just get dates with women who you aren't that excited about. You will learn deep persuasion skills borrowed from the elite corners of the espionage world that will train you how to persuade anyone and how to seduce anyone, from the woman you just met to your wife or girlfriend. Enrollment opens April 22nd, and closes on the 26th. Click the link and don't miss this opportunity. It's the only one you'll get this year.
All right, that's Sexpionage 2.0. I dropped 1.0 last year. And when I said this is probably the only time I'm going to be able to do that this year, I wasn't lying. So, those of you guys who didn't get into Sexpionage last year, you missed your opportunity unless you joined my mastermind group. All right, because those guys got access to the material. Here's the thing about Sexpionage, it's deep persuasion skills, and I'm using behavioral sciences to allow you to persuade anybody, and particularly in seduction and seduce anybody. So whether it's you're trying to reattract your wife, or get that girl from work, or or get a girl that you've been thinking about but you just haven't been sure about how to approach, or if you're just out there as a single guy dating, like, this tells you how to seduce in a way that's a much higher level than anything you're ever going to look at. And I have new course material that talks about inner game and some other skills and tactics that you haven't seen yet. So even if you took Sexpionage 1.0 last year, well, it's a new year. I got new material, and we're going to be doing coaching every week with practice and vignettes and working on the skills of seduction. So get into my school community. It's free to get into the community. All right. And there's free stuff that's there, free courses, all kinds of stuff. Click the link in the description and be ready, because sometime either the end of this month or beginning of March, I'm going to launch Sexpionage 2.0. And if you don't get in the enrollment, you'll miss the opportunity for the year. All right. So stay tuned for that. Now, back to the topic. Let's look at other structures that can work if you're trying to build a peak relationship. First one might be more or less obvious, and that's monogamy. This is where you don't get sexual desires met from anyone outside of the relationship. Now, with all these structures, there are trade offs. Okay. So there is no right answer here, there's only a trade off. The only wrong answer would be to go into open polyamory if you expect to have a long term legacy relationship, which means it's your long term person that you grow old with. And that's, open polyamory is not a good idea. It won't get you there, won't get you in a peak happy relationship, particularly if you're the man in the equation. These other structures can work. Now, as we go through this, some women and some men might look at these answers as going, well, that doesn't really suit me, or that's not what I would want to do, or whatever. That's fine. I'm not saying you have to do any of these. Okay. I want you to set your judgments aside for a minute as to what you think you want. And let's just look at the picture of what could work. All right. What that means is, when I say could work, I mean what could work for a long term happy relationship. So when I say what could work, I'm talking about what could work for a long term happy relationship where both the man and the woman are at peak levels of happiness and they last into their old age until, somebody's no longer alive, right? Like, for that peak experience, long-term relationship, these are all possible structures. For each one, it's a trade-off. There's pros and cons, and there's problems, and there's solutions and good things. So you have to choose, as well as with your woman that you're with, she has to be able to choose what structures can work for her and for you. Okay. And sometimes what you think can work isn't exactly what can work. So you really have to use, some critical thinking here, because there's socially conditioned ideas. And now polyamory and ethical non-monogamy is becoming a more socially conditioned and acceptable idea. But a lot of these ideas are either not going to work or terrible, or maybe they're just not good for you, or maybe they're just not good for the woman you're trying to be with. So you have to decide based on so you have to decide which way you're going to go. All right. But monogamy, that takes out a lot of complication for sure. But monogamy is actually one of the more difficult ones to make successful. not successful just in staying together. Because you can have a low drama, monogamous, lukewarm, sex free marriage. A lot of people are having that, where they don't have any passion for their partners. Sex is abysmal, but hey, they're together for the kids or whatever. That's the definition of monogamy for a lot of couples. That's not a peak relationship. So monogamy is the most socially acceptable and in some ways the least complicated and maybe has the least amount of drama. But what you struggle with is bringing variety into the relationship. And who struggles with that the most is actually the woman. You guys think it's you, but it's really not. The woman gets bored. This is statistics, this is data. It shows that the woman gets bored sexually in the relationship much faster than the man does, which is why she usually drives a drop off in sexual frequency and enthusiasm. Okay, so the struggle in a monogamous relationship is maintaining enthusiasm and maintaining that spark throughout the life of the relationship. And you can do it. Okay, so those guys who are in my mastermind group and those guys who learn seduction skills and maybe get some of those sexpionage skills as well, those guys are going to be more able to do it than the average person. But most people really struggle in maintaining that spark throughout the entire relationship. So that is the conflict or problem, but monogamy is a structure that can work for long-term happiness. Okay. So the next one would be something called covert polygyny. So basically, if a guy is able to sleep with other women, it can work. If a woman sleeps with other men, it can't work. This is an unpopular idea, but it's true. It's not my fault. Don't kill the messenger. I didn't design the female brain the way it's designed, and I didn't cause evolution to be the way it is, and I didn't design the male brain the way it is. Okay. I'm just the messenger. And the reality is, it don't work if women sleep around. It can work, not saying it should or whatever. That's up to you. It can work if a guy does. Just is what it is. But there's ways to do it ethically, and there's ways to do it practically, and there's a lot of communication in any of these structures that a couple needs to have. I would say in all of them, to include monogamy. Communication is definitely the key. But covert polygyny, a lot of people experience this, okay, is where she stays monogamous and the man in the equation has sex with other women outside of the relationship in secret. Now, the reason it's not cheating, because I don't recommend cheating, and cheating is not a recipe for success, okay? The reason it's not cheating is because she knows it's happening. It's permissive. She just doesn't want to know the details, doesn't want to know about it, and she doesn't want to be embarrassed by it. So it's not public. All right. So this is when the guy occasionally does something, or he has a little side person that he sometimes gets with. Again, I'm not saying this is right, but it's a possible structure. Okay. Now there's a lot of problems with this though. And that's maintaining the dread, and a woman's going to have a lot more dread and a lot more worry about the guy leaving her for the other woman. She's going to be, a lot of women are not going to be able to handle this that well. Okay. So most women are not going to be good with this structure, but there are some that are, and it can work out. And that's just a way, that's a fact. But a lot of women will struggle with this and will struggle feeling like the number one in the relationship when he occasionally sleeps around, So that's the struggles. There are trade-offs. This can be very difficult to manage from a dread perspective, but it is a structure. Overt polygyny is the same thing as covert polygyny. It's just that you're having other women outside of the relationship and it's not a secret. All right. So this is where she knows about it. She may know who your girlfriend is. She may know details. Okay. She's still monogamous to you, but you have these other things going on and she knows. This is even more difficult to manage than the covert one, especially if other people know outside of the relationship. In other words, neighbors, families, friend, because then you're being judged by it. And now she has to deal with the social repercussions. And so do you, on top of facing the fact that you're sleeping with somebody else and all the dread that that brings her. So this can be very, very difficult to manage. It is possible to have that peak happy relationship long term, but and I don't just mean for the guy, I mean for the girl too, but it is a more difficult, okay, than at least than covert. The next structure is covert soft harem. This is where you and her bring other women into the bedroom. So this is doing the threesome thing, basically. Now, these are temporary situations in a covert soft harem. That's what makes it a soft harem, which is that the other person's not in the relationship. It's still you and your wife or your main girl, right? It's still you and your LTR. It's just that occasionally you might have other girls that jump in the bedroom with you. Okay. Now it's covert because it's not a secret between you and your LTR, but it's a secret to most other people. In other words, you're maintaining the face of a normal monogamous couple. So when people look at you guys, your family, a lot of your friends, neighbors, they see you as just a normal monogamous happy couple. But the reality is behind closed doors, you sometimes will have a threesome with another woman, not another guy. Okay. And you know, that kind of stuff is just done more discreetly. This, if the girl is a good fit for this, this is actually the easiest to manage long term. Now that's controversial what I just said, but keep in mind it's the girl that has to be a good fit. She has to derive pleasure and enjoyment from experiencing other women. And if she is that person who would prefer to be with you, she's not preferring other women, like preferring women over you. She would prefer you, prefer a man. She's in a relationship with you. She sees you as the sexual best, but she does get pleasure from seeing you with other women. She does get pleasure with experiencing that with you. And then she doesn't have to worry about it either, like with you sleeping with somebody outside of her being there. So that dread gets removed. This can be some of the easiest scenarios to manage if the girl is a good fit. If the girl is not, then it's not easy to manage. Okay. So this is a structure, though, that can work for long term success. Now, the next one is a overt soft harem. So it's the same as covert, except you're more publicly open about it. You would talk about it and not try to hide your lifestyle. This is slightly more difficult to manage because of social judgment. Women are very sensitive to judgment. So, and very sensitive to social opinions. So, if this is the structure, it's like you have to really be aware of that social repercussion, and it's something you're going to have to manage. All right. Then there's covert harem. So covert harem is where you have more than one woman in the relationship. So it's not just sleeping with other women in the relationship occasionally. It's actually like having another girlfriend who's also your girlfriend's girlfriend. Like all three of you are in a relationship. All right. The difference is you're not telling the public about it. So it's covert. So the appearance is that you're just a happy couple with one of them. But the reality is there's another person in there. So maybe you have a wife, for example, and you're married, and then a friend is actually in that relationship with you, has sex with you and her, but you don't tell most people about that. You're discreet about that. Believe it or not, this is a thing and can actually work. And I've seen it work and coached people who've made it work. It's not for everybody, okay? But it is something that's there. And there's different reasons that why. But you have to understand, we evolved from these polyamorous tribal situations, which were very divisive, okay, between men and women. And we got into more of a harem structure first. Harems came before monogamy, and those are male driven harems where a man would have multiple women, multiple wives. And then this is not necessarily the best for society because over 60% of men didn't have any mating opportunity at all. So if you didn't have resources, if you weren't the more dominant force, the bottom 60% didn't have women to mate with. So that bottom 60% became violent. And you see that today in Afghanistan. and places like that. So harems were a part of our evolution. And they came before monogamy. Okay, but and that means that a woman's brain tends to be wired to be able to handle those. Okay, a lot more women than you realize are. And this is why some of these scenarios work. But it's a bit difficult to have someone in your relationship and they keep that discreet from everybody else. So that's the challenge in the social judgment and ostracization, depending on what part of the world you're in. And then the last one I'll cover is a overt harem or just a harem. This is where you have multiple women or multiple wives, and nothing's really kept a secret. So, for example, some Muslims have multiple wives. They can have up to 3 wives according to Sharia law, and they live in countries where that's allowed. Okay. And socially acceptable. Now, harems of either kind, overt or covert, are the toughest to manage because now you're managing women who you're managing another person, or possibly, if it's in the case of Muslims, up to 3 wives, you could have a 4-person relationship, and you got to manage the power dynamic between all these women. You got to manage getting everybody's needs met. You got to manage communication between everybody. It's a very tough scenario to run. Now, I'm not saying it's a lot to manage. It's a lot of drama sometimes. And it's a lot of, I've coached people who've done this. I've coached Muslim men who've had multiple wives. It's a lot to handle. You know what I mean? And so it's not for everybody. It's not for me. I don't want multiple wives like that. I mean, I don't see a place in my future for that. Right. So it's not, it's a difficult thing to manage, but people do it and they can do it successfully. And, and they can have good peak relationships, usually with the main girl or the top girl in the harem. And so, and the other girls in the harem seem to be happy in some of these structures. So that's it. That's your relationship structures. That's what you can do. Open polyamory isn't the answer. It's a bad deal for you. Unless it's casual and you have no plans with that girl for the future, don't do it. Don't let somebody convince you that the answer to spicing up your marriage or the answer to making the girl you're with happy is to allow her to have sex with other people. You're better off just ending the relationship at that point.